Kim, if you would please call the roll.
Senator Boswell. Senator Douglas.
Present.
Senator Thomas. Representative Chester Burton. Representative McCool. Representative Pollock.
Here.
Representative Hart.
Here.
Chairman Meredith.
Present. And we do have a quorum, duly constituted to do business. First item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes of November 13th meeting of the committee. Is there a motion? There is a motion and a second. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell.
Aye.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Thomas. Representative Chester Burton. Representative McCool. Representative Pollock.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Total number of items on the agenda today are 287 in the amount of $293,048,246.79. All vendors are registered with the Secretary of State's office. Next is the deferred list, which is from the November routine MOA pink list, is Department of Local Government. If representatives are here, please come forward. Identify yourself for the record.
Good morning, Chair, Meredith, members. Matthew Stevens, I'm General Counsel at Department for Local Government. We have a staff member trying to come in remotely as well. Hope he can participate.
Well, thank you for being here this morning. Appreciate you making yourself available to us. Senator Boswell has questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. Yes, so this is number 20 on the Department of Local Government, having to do with land acquisition. It says, and I know it's a very brief summary, but for somebody who's sitting up here and have a lot of experience in construction and developing real estate and properties, this caught my attention. It just says provide funds to acquire the property located at 2271 Highway 30 West for the construction of 20 single-family housing units, and it says essentially what I read when I read this. It says that this property is being acquired at a cost of $300,000 for one individual property lot. So we call this in. We need to hear more about this.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I appreciate the opportunity to come over and explain and give answers to your questions. So the city of Jackson will use the $6 million to not only acquire 57 acres outside the floodplain in Breathitt County, they're going to subdivide it into lots for construction of initially 17 to 20 homes for low to moderate income disaster impacted persons. The funds will also be used for infrastructure, including water and sewer, and roadway expansion to accommodate emergency vehicles and school buses. This is basically a development of entire community. The City of Jackson will be partnering with Housing Development Alliance, HDA. The size of the property, 57 acres, you talked about the acquisition, allows for future development of the site as well. So initially it's going to be 17 to 20 homes. The city has plans to expand, and it's a larger effort of the city's development of multiple sites for affordable housing and resilient housing stock there in Jackson after the deadly floods.
So let's follow up. So you're saying here that the description we have in this particular one from last month is not accurate then, because it says here that it's for 20 single family. You're saying now it's much more. It's actually 57 acres, and it's involving a whole lot more. So this essentially the information we had from last month really probably should have been a whole lot more details.
Yeah, that's just a small snapshot of the entire project. Like I said, it's 57 acres, initially 17 to 20 homes, and the city has plans to expand.
Okay, in this month's, we also had not that we have it on the pull list, but we have an additional project in the same, and also in Jackson now. And so is this part of the same
It's part of the same Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program. That's part of the $297 million that the Commonwealth received from Housing Urban Development. It's all federal funds.
Okay. Well, I think that satisfies me for now. I would just say, though, I think this might be an example of federal funds flowing to the state that we're going to have to get our fund. Look, this was a disaster relief, and I'm sure some of these funds, a lot of these funds were necessary, but as with any federal program, it seems like everything involved with the federal government costs a whole lot more money. Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you, Senator.
If no one else here, I'm okay with that.
Any other questions, comments? Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor vote aye, all those opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell.
Aye.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Thomas. Representative Chester Burton. Representative McCool. Representative Pollock.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Excuse me. Next order of business, consideration of the agenda, including the deferred list, personal service contract list, PSC amendment list, memorandum of agreement list, and the memorandum of agreement amendment list, except for those items selected for further review. Do you have a motion to consider the contracts review?
Second.
Chair Hart, second by aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell.
Aye.
Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Thomas. Representative Chester Burton. Representative McCool. Representative Pollock.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye, motion carries. First item on the pool list are with the Transportation Office of Secretary, and our numbers 7 through 10 on the PSC less than $10,000 and under goldenrod list. If representatives are here, please come forward, identify yourself for the record.
Good morning. Laura Hagan, Director of the Division of Purchases for Transportation.
Are you flying solo this morning?
No, Ryan, are you on?
Yes. Good morning. Ryan Fisher with the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety.
Thank you for joining this morning. I would ask you all if you would please raise your right hand. And do you solemnly swear to tell them the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate you being available to us this morning. I request these contracts to be pulled. Not that I have an issue with them, but it's kind of interesting for me that this is a study that we're engaging folks to do the NHTSA EMS assessment, which more healthcare related, I think, than transportation related. And I understand this is a federal requirement to gather this data, this information. But my question is what happens after this project is completed?
We receive a report, a final report through the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and the assessment identifies a lot of different ways. NHTSA is their main mission is to prevent fatalities on the roadways, and that's kind of goes along with the Highway Safety Office as well. But there's a lot of areas where if we can decrease the time it takes at the crash scene with EMS and things, it helps to reduce secondary crashes, and it prevents fatalities. And it's just us working with emergency medical services and identifying partnerships to get them some areas and to where they can receive more funding to help clear crash scenes faster and get there and get it cleaned up quicker.
How often is this study required?
We had a management review a year ago, and this was a recommendation from NHTSA, and it was using their funding, their 402 funding. It's not actually required. There's no set time frame. It's just it's just a recommendation when they identify that there's needs in that area.
Well, there's definitely need, and my reason for pulling these contracts, it's not a gotcha kind of moment. It's something I'm very interested in because the biggest cause of death for folks under the age of 45 in Kentucky, trauma, and principal problem there are highway crashes, accidents. So this certainly has some applicability to our Commonwealth. But again, I'm just curious, once we get the data, what do we do with it? And one of the issues we have is lack of trauma services in our rural areas. Certainly the issues of trauma related to car accidents are more pronounced in rural areas because of our secondary roads primarily. So I'm just trying to understand what we do with this information once we have it. Does this, I assume there's this federal funding that's tied to this, associated with this?
Chairman, can you hear me? This is Bill Bell. I'm also with the Office of Highway Safety. We actually had someone from the Kentucky Hospital Association speak on the trauma side. They have several recommendations, and we would love to have someone, either Senator Meredith or someone from the legislature, to review these recommendations as well. I know Senator Meredith has a lot of experience, obviously, in this area.
I certainly do. Again, that's the reason I pulled the contracts. I've got a little interest in it because it's a major problem with our healthcare delivery system is the lack of resources available. But it's a twofold problem. One is a lack of healthcare resources, but secondly is a condition of secondary roads throughout rural Kentucky, and had to be addressed by two different groups. And again, I'm just trying to understand, once you collect the data, how it's disseminated and what does it result in. I would hope there'd be some specific recommendations to address the trauma situation. And just for the committee's information, we passed a trauma legislation back in 2008 to establish trauma centers throughout Kentucky, and we've never funded that legislation. And if we're going to have this data and not do anything with it, I'm not sure what the value is of collecting the data. And so that's one side of it. But secondly, does this result in additional funding for rural secondary roads? Because we know that's a problem.
Well, the main recipient of these recommendations is the Kentucky Board of EMS, and then all of their partners as well. And I'll have, Ryan can definitely send you the report as soon as possible. But as far as secondary rural roads, that would be a question more for the State Highway Engineer's Office. And so we can share that report with them as well, and management at Transportation Cabinet.
Well, I guess that may be the next step, and I would appreciate receiving that report and see what the recommendations are, and maybe we can move forward from there. But again, I was just trying to understand how the data is used and what the expectations are once we receive it. But I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Any questions, comments from other committee members? Representative Pollack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just sitting here listening to this dialogue back and forth, and Mr. Chairman, you bring up a valid point here. We do data, we do consulting, we spend a lot of money, and what do we do with the data? So it's important to have this conversation that we're having right now, because if we're going to spend the dollars to provide the data, if we're going to spend the dollars to do consultations, bring the people to the table to take action on this data that we're getting. And you made a great point, sir, in providing Senator Meredith to the table, an invite there, and to take this data and to do something with it. And I think that's where the ball gets dropped. The follow-up after we provide this type of information, which is valid, is very important information that we can better our trauma through EMS and all those type of activities and experiences. But, I mean, somebody just needs to take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and bring people to the table, and let's do something with this data. Let's do something with this consultation, these dollars that we're spending. And so I appreciate what's being brought forth to us this morning already. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate those remarks. And, you know, it's multifactoid. First is the conditions of secondary roads throughout Kentucky. Speeding is always a problem in rural Kentucky. The issue of lack of trauma centers is a problem, but also EMS, part of the response time is that there's not enough EMS workers to transport people on a timely basis. So how do we address that one as well? But it's a big issue, and I'll look forward to the report, and I'll be glad to share that with our
Mr.
other
Chair.
committee members as well.
One more comment, please. This brings a good point for me to, I am sponsoring a distracted driving bill this coming session, and obviously wanted to have some co-sponsors on that, but seriously, that is one of the leading causes of fatalities on our Kentucky highways is distracted driving. Thank you.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Any other committee members want to promote their legislation for this next session? Not at this time. All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments? There being none, I entertain a motion to approve these contracts.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Motion seconded by Representative Chester Burton. All those in favor vote aye. All opposed vote no.
This whole section.
Yes, the whole section, all 7 through 10. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed will vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell. Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Thomas. Representative Chester Burton.
Yes.
Representative McCool. Representative Pollock.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you for being available to us. We appreciate it. Next item on the pull list with the Auditor of Public Accounts is number 1 on the routine PSC green list. Representatives are here. Good to see you folks this morning. If you would, please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Lauren Ferguson, Chief of Staff to Auditor Allison Ball.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Alex McGarrah from Auditor Ball's Office, General Counsel.
Pleasure having you both here this morning. If you would, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Senator Douglas has questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Regarding this particular contract, a few things sort of stuck out with me. It's going to be a performance review, and it says here that we're going to identify, let's see here, gaps in the performance, publicly available material, and gathering audited entities' internal materials. Could you help me out a little bit with what that means?
Absolutely, Senator. So if I could take a step back here, the General Assembly passed House Bill 825, which is, quite frankly, one of the most historic education audit bills probably in the Commonwealth's history. Never has there been a full-scale performance review of the Kentucky Department of Education. And to me, it signals that the General Assembly is extremely serious about making sure that Kentuckians have the best education possible, which aligns greatly with Auditor Ball's mission, which is the same. This audit is going to try to take a comprehensive look at as much of KDE as possible. The auditor's office has the ability to look at a lot of internal information that the public can't see, obviously. We don't have the same Open Records Act constraints on us. We have subpoena authority. We have full authority to access whatever information we want. So we're able to see when we talk about internal documents and sort of the internal processes that KDE is performing, we're able to go in and look at a lot of information that the public is not, in order to determine a wide variety of aspects of KDE's operational practices, their internal decision making on curriculum, their sort of their relationship with the public, their relationship with school districts. We can look at just a ton of information that normally isn't available to the public to really get a good sense of how they're performing and whether they're truly doing what's best for Kentucky.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, may I ask one more thing? I'll make it.
Yes, please.
As we move on down the description of this particular contract, it also says conducting surveys of relevant constituent groups, both inside and outside of the audited entities, including educators, parents, and local school district and administrators. will those questions be in isolation? As I know that at least some of the teachers that I have spoken with have been very, very, very reluctant to be open and share
Yes.
when other certain groups are around. So I guess I have a twofold question. Will those interviews be done in isolation, number one? And number two, will there also be recommendations offered?
Absolutely, Senator. Okay, so one thing that the auditor's office takes extremely seriously is the confidentiality of the information that is provided to us. We have an almost 50-year work paper privilege from disclosure that protects our records from being disclosed. And it's an extremely important aspect of what we do because, as you say, there is a lot of people are afraid to come out with information. They're afraid because they're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid of public scrutiny of what they're going to say. And so our intent with all of our audits, every single one of them, whether it's KDE, CHFS, whoever it may be, and as the general counsel, and I know Auditor Ball does, we take the protection of the information that we receive from constituents extremely seriously. We want to stress that every one of those constituent groups you mentioned, educators, administrators, the staff at school who aren't educators, parents, every individual should feel completely comfortable with coming to us because I will go to my grave making sure that information is protected. We need people to make sure that they can feel like they can speak honestly and openly to us about what's really going on, because that's the only way that we're going to improve education in Kentucky is honest conversation.
And will there be some recommendations offered?
Yes, we are going to issue a full-blown report. Again, one of the most comprehensive performance review of the Kentucky Department of Education history, and we plan on it having many recommendations for improvement. And also to say that we also plan on pointing out what the KDE is doing well, because that's just as important as pointing out on the things that they can improve on. If they know what they're doing well, then they can continue to do what they're doing well. And then our recommendations will also work toward obviously improving their performance so that they know what to improve on.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate what you're doing. I know that members of the General Assembly really appreciate the endeavor that you're about to undertake. And I think this is really, really important, not only to the parents here in the Commonwealth, but to the taxpayers of the Commonwealth who are looking to see what they're actually getting for the money that they're putting in. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Boswell.
This is a new contract,
Yes.
correct? Yes, and how, just curiosity, how did we arrive at exactly $1 million?
Sure. So, okay, there's an interesting financial background to this. So, if you go back to Governor Beshear's April 10th letter, where he issued a letter to the members of the General Assembly saying that there's a list of about 20 bills that he can't execute because he doesn't believe he has the funding to do so. Senate Bill 151, House Bill 825 was on this list. And the governor's office actually projected this to cost the Commonwealth $2 million. But we issued an RFI to the public to see who could respond and what their responses were going to be like. Even though we had non-competitive bidding rights, but we thought it'd be responsible to see what the market had to offer. And we actually were able to secure a bid from Public Consulting Group, which is in my opinion, the preeminent education auditing firm in the country, maybe even the world. They've done, they have 17 of the 20 largest school districts in the nation that they do audits for. They have done performance reviews of Alabama's Department of Education, Ohio's, South Carolina's, Delaware's, a whole host. And what they did is their projected cost for assisting us with this audit was just under $1 million. It was about $862 or something like that. And I have the RFI actually right here that I can provide to the members if they'd like to see it. It's about 240 pages, pretty detailed examination. But they plan on doing a ton of work in this audit. We're going to be working side by side with them. Usually, A lot of the times in the past, it seems like the auditor's office has secured help and then kind of just let the entity run with it, and without much oversight. But we plan on being very involved in this process to ensure that every dollar that we are spending on this audit is actually worth it, and it's going to good use. Their RFI details a lot of what they plan on doing in this audit. And so it's probably just easier if I provide that to the members of the committee so they can see.
Thank you for that explanation. I'm just very leery about all these audits that we have, and I'm not yet seeing that much accomplished as far as saving the taxpayers, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I have my own views about this.
Sure.
A couple of questions for you. First is, what's the timeline for completion? When could we expect a report?
So the due date is July 1st of 2025. Well, that's actually the due date that was set out by House Bill 825. But we want to get, and we want to get it as soon as to the members of the General Assembly as soon as possible. But I think that we do also want to take every day that we can to really do an in-depth look of KDE. So July 1st of 2025.
Well, I think this is good legislation and does present a unique opportunity to move our state forward. And I'm curious what is Commissioner Fletcher's involvement in this? Are y'all having dialogue with him? Is he receptive to it? Does he understand what we're trying to accomplish?
Absolutely, Senator. We had, so part of our process is having an entrance conference with the entity that we're auditing, and we had an entrance conference with Commissioner Fletcher and many other members of KDE. They've been completely receptive to the audit so far. They've been very open. There hasn't been, we haven't been blocked off from anything. It's been great dialogue so far, and we're still. I wouldn't say we're in sort of the middle of the audit, kind of. So everything's been great so far. It's been extremely easy working with them so far. So we hope that continues.
And I'm very encouraged to hear that. And he's still relatively new in his position, so I think we kind of give him a clean slate to work with. So maybe we can give him a good plan going forward. But I look forward to the report. And
absolutely,
I know you folks will do an excellent job. Any other questions, comments? Senator Boswell, a follow up?
Yeah, just necessarily a question, but a follow up, just a statement. So it mentions here that the contractor's review will include identifying state and federal mandates, and I'm assure you there's going to be some changes at the federal level as far as these mandates. I hope there are.
Absolutely.
Is there a motion to approve? Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell. Senator Douglas.
Aye, but explain my vote.
Yes.
I hope that in doing this audit, we really follow some of the constitutional guidelines, some of the Commonwealth constitutional guidelines, and not the feeling of what people think. Because
Absolutely.
taxpayers don't mind paying what they're responsible for, but they're getting tired of paying for feelings. Thank you.
Senator Thomas. Representative Chester Burton.
Yes.
Representative McCool. Representative Pollock.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you all for being available to us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the pull list are with the Department of Highways and our numbers 6 and 7 on the routine PSC green list. And we'll also discuss 12, 16, 19, 20 through 21, 23, 31, 33, 50, and 52 on the PSC amendment Ivory list. But taking care of business first, and this is a virtual testimony, I do believe.
That is correct. Chairman Meredith, I'm Eric Pelfrey, our Director of Professional Services. And I'm joined by James Edmonds, who's our Project Manager for Contracts 6 and 7.
Thank you for making yourself available to us this morning. If you would, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you. We'll start with contract 6 and 7 on the routine PSC green list, and Senator Douglas has questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is, why couldn't you be here?
Well, I have a meeting in 30 minutes here in the building, and I've got a full day. Also, I was advised of the majority of the contracts at 4:42 yesterday, so I'll be providing response on those best I can, but it's obviously very difficult for me to gather project managers from across the state after business hours.
you knew the contract was coming up for review, right?
We submit probably 50 or so contracts each month. So I'm not sure which ones are going to be pulled until they are pulled.
Okay. Well, thank you. My main question, pardon me, if I can, how many? Just two questions. How many bridges are we looking at least just with these two contracts, which total about $6.5 million? And then the second question is, do you have any idea of how much of this was used in the previous year? How much of these funds?
James will probably have a lot more detail on those, but it looks like for the contract with Michael Baker, there were 136 bridges, and I'm scanning through the one with HDR, but it's, James, do you know that offhand? I know it's over 100, but.
Yeah, there's about 150 with HDRs, I believe.
Yeah, it looks like 194 maybe, actually.
Yes.
And then, James, I believe this is a newer type of contract. Is that correct? It's a new federal requirement?
Yes, this contract is to address CIF details, that's constraint-induced fracture details. And this is it's been a known mechanism of fracture in bridges for 20 years now. But our goal is to identify these type of details on the bridges and remove them. So this contract would include plan review, inspection, and then design of the retrofit details.
Yeah, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this not only includes inspection, but you just said it includes design services?
Yes, it does, correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Senator Boswell.
You may have answered this, but I didn't think I missed it. Were there other bidders on these contracts?
We had a total of 4 responses, and we do it's our process for engineers is determined by qualifications. So there is not a cost component until we select the most qualified firm.
Okay, and then one more question. So these numbers that you've given us here, so are these subject to a change order or any type of additional fees? Is it throughout this contract? So what I'm finding with a lot of these contracts is we get change orders, we get things, and we start to add these. Are these bids basically what you consider to be a percentage of what? I mean, what is the basis for this per bridge contract? I mean, how did you arrive at these numbers? It's just a pure estimation of the work that's going to be completed?
James, do you want to take it on at least this type of contract, and I can probably answer to the broader picture from all the engineering services that we provide?
Sure. We developed this list of bridges based upon screening internally throughout our bridge inspection offices throughout the state, and it identified several types of bridges that potentially have this type of detail. Now, the contract and the estimation of includes the inspection, which requires the man hours to do so, as well as some sophisticated inspection equipment, man lifts and leased and snooper trucks at the most. And then as well, we also considered the time to design such retrofits. And we also looked through the contract for many ways of cost savings. We looked to several of these details are similar, and several of these type bridges fall in one corridor. And so that's been a big instruction to the consultants that we look to save funding in reusing a lot of our design drawings. And so the estimation of this, it was a challenging feat because it's such a large number of bridges, but we spent a lot of time and effort into trying to get this number right. So that not to have modifications further on down the road.
Correct. And I think also, Senator Boswell, there's with a large number of structures like this, there is an economy of scale. So if it was potentially 10 structures, we would have paid more per structure. But obviously we understand that both us and the relationship working alongside both HDR and Michael Baker, there will be an economy of scale. The more structures, the less you pay per structure. And also I want to add that these contracts are both cost plus a fixed fee, which is a little bit atypical for us. But again, we use that cost mechanism if it's something that's a newer type of project where we don't have as much faith in estimates through using historical estimates that we've done in the past. So since this is new, both of these contracts, which like you mentioned are in excess of $3 million, the only requirement that we have is to pay for about 10% of that. Everything else, as the consultants perform the work, they submit those invoices to us, and James will review those and approve those per month.
Well, I certainly understand the scale of doing a lot of volume versus a small number. But it seemed, in a sense, since this is a new contract, though, for me personally, it would have made more sense for some of these projects to be done, let's say 10 of them. And then we can see what the cost for those are going to be versus throwing at this huge number. That's my own thought. That's all.
I have a question for you. Back in, I think it was 2016, we identified 1,000 bridges that need to be replaced, and I think a plan was put together to try to obviously address that issue. This is almost a decade back. So where are we now? When we talk about 159, I can't believe that that's all we have that need attention. Are these the most critical? Where are we on that 1,000 threshold?
The 1,000 threshold that has been worked on and continues to be worked on. A lot of those were smaller county bridges at the time, and smaller roadways. The majority of the bridges that are, just to go ahead and say, Kentucky has about 14,600 bridges in our inventory. That's what we inspect, and those belong to county and state. A lot of the bridges in this specific contract are larger bridges. They're long span bridges. They're built out of steel, and we build them out of steel in order to achieve longer spans, and therefore they're on bigger, more highly traveled roads. This is the detail that's in question here is a type of weld detail, and it's known for fracturing. It's known for a brittle fracture, sudden fracture, and it hasn't to date caused a collapse in a bridge, but it has occurred in several of bridges with this type of detail around the country. FHWA has noted this in a memo to us, and they've also discussed it with us multiple times in past review years. And so this is bridges continue to deteriorate, and we continue to have areas that need to be addressed on them. And ultimately, when these retrofits are completed, we have a more reliable system. We have far less risk to the traveling public, far less safety risk, far less risk of an interruption of their travel.
I appreciate your answer. And again, this is one of those gotcha questions. I'm just trying to get a handle on if we had 1,000 back in 2016, what's the actual number today? And I know that changes every year because as we go out, bridges deteriorate. So for transportation purposes, budget purposes, trying to get a handle on how many bridges do we currently have that are considered deficient?
Well, we have the way we categorize bridges is we categorize them as good, fair, poor, and we submit a transportation asset management plan to FHWA. I believe every 2 years. I'm not as directly involved with that as others are, but that gives a good idea to you all as to what's happening with our transportation network. It's always a moving target, and it always changes. Bridges continue to deteriorate, but we work on our percentages, and I think around 10% to 12 to 13% area is what we submitted last time for our TAMP. That's what's poor, considered poor. That doesn't mean that they're failing or about to fail, but means that they're getting close to the point that something will have to be done.
Well, thank you. Again, I'm just trying to determine whether we're making progress or not, because it's not that long till we'll have to start putting the budget together for the next biennial period, and this is an issue we need to address it. But I appreciate your testimony, appreciate the information. Any other questions, comments? If not, I entertain a motion to approve PSC number 6 and 7.
Make a motion.
Motion by Representative Chester Burton. Is there a second? Second by Co-Chair Hart. All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed will vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell.
No.
Senator Douglas.
I would explain my vote.
Yes.
You know, gentlemen, I hope, you know, we're looking at $7 million here, and I'm hoping this is sort of a one-time issue, especially given the fact that some of the other things, the 1,000 other bridges have already been inquired about. I also hope that we can do this in a timely way, and we know that there is specialized equipment that's used, but that equipment can be used on more than one bridge over time. So it's not like we're repurchasing that equipment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Thomas. Representative Chester Burton.
Yes.
Representative McCool. Representative Pollock.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. We'll move on to PSC 12 through 16, 19 through 21, 23, 31, 33, and 50 through 52. And Senator Boswell has questions regarding these contracts. It's on the amendment list, Ivory list. Yes.
Yes, there's a group of engineering things here, and I have some questions, really. Yes, these all have to do with engineering fees on these Department of Highways, and they're all, most of them, I think all these are having to do with increased funds, increased costs as a result of these contracts. And so, who is going to be speaking on behalf of this?
Eric Pelfrey. I'm still joining virtually. Senator
Yeah, I
Boswell.
see you up there. Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
All right. So, can you tell me on these contracts, when they were bid originally, are they based on a percentage of the estimation of the amount of work that's going to be done? I mean, how did you arrive at these bids on all these contracts?
Yeah, thank you for allowing the opportunity to explain. I know we've been through this a little bit over the past few months, but from the perspective of the Transportation Cabinet, and specifically from my office and the Division of Professional Services, we use a phased contracting approach. So you're correct that I think the large majority of these contracts are for what we call contract modifications. That's a term that we use on the design side versus a change order on the construction side. And not to pick on my friends down the hall in construction, but I think typically if you do see a construction change order, that's usually a bad thing. It means that we ran into something in the field that we did not expect, and that's going to either add time and or money, and usually both. In my world, in the design side, that is not a bad thing. What we do is we use that phased approach. So in our initial request for proposal, the advertisements that we put out for the consultants to submit their qualification-based selection, we let them know that we are likely going to start with just a what we call preliminary engineering, which is phase 1 design. And then after we complete phase 1 design, which often, if it's a federally funded job, which the majority of ours do, that includes an environmental services component. After we complete that in our NEPA process, then we enter into phase 2 engineering, which could include also structure design, traffic services for signals and lighting, and lots of other components. And again, for the benefit of the cabinet, it's far more effective for both time and money. So just to attack the money portion, I'll mention that if we advertise for a full project, which we actually used to do probably 20 years ago, we would overspend, because the consultant, if we're going to enter into a contract, we may assume a certain amount of factors. The consultant is always going to assume worst case scenario. And when they do, that obviously increases their risk, which increases their cost, which then makes it far less cost effective for us as a cabinet. I think that all but maybe one of these projects was directly funded also from our 6-year plan, which thank you all for giving us the authority to go ahead and procure these contracts through that. So by and large, the majority of those projects in the highway plan, we have a total project budget. We only use a portion of that for the first preliminary engineering, that phase 1 engineering. So we know that we're going to modify and use the remaining funds for the phase 2 approach. So again, we use a phased approach, and I understand the concern if we enter into, let's say, a contract for $500,000 and then we add $1 million. From your perspective, you may not understand. You may think that we're tripling the cost, but in essence, we're being more cost effective by understanding which preferred alignment we're going to use rather than studying the entire project. Also, that helps us cut down on the actual time to get it delivered.
You know, when we do a lot of these things regarding these type of services, engineering, architect, it seems to me that there's no real incentive for the engineers or the architects or the construction managers, because the more the project costs, the more money they make. And that's, as I see these, I look at these, and so these contracts, are these renewals with the same company from last year?
So
These
these are
renewal
each,
contracts.
these are not renewals. These are, again, they're contract modifications where we enter into the initial contract because that consultant was deemed the most qualified.
Okay.
And then that consultant does continue until completion. Of course, we always have the ability to fire a consultant if they're not performing, if they're late, if we think that they're too expensive. There's a whole list of reasons, and that has happened, but that's usually very rare.
So if I may, just my last question. So let's just take number 12. I don't want to pick on them in particular. The original contract was $5,108,000, and today we're increasing that contract by $138,000. Is that correct?
Give me just a second and I'll pull up the details. I don't know if that's entirely accurate, because I don't think that initial contract amount was $5 million. I think that's the total that we're at now.
Okay, so let's say that let's just take that off. I guess
Okay.
what I'm saying is, what I don't understand is, you know, if I'm an engineering firm and I receive a contract for $5 million, I see little reason why that should ever be increased. That's a lot of money to go to a firm. And I'm not saying, I don't know what the profit margin is on a business like this, but I think it's pretty significant. And it concerns me when we have these huge contracts. You would think that these numbers would be sufficient not to have these increased costs that we're seeing on here. And that's what concerns me.
Completely valid concern, and I give you my word that we take this very seriously. We in Kentucky, at least, we have a 15% profit for what we deem our lump sum contracts, which basically, don't want to get into too much detail, but we do an independent estimate, as does the consultant. They have a built-in 15% profit, and that's most states across the country do that. We have a good working relationship with our friends in our auditor's office, and they perform post audits on every contract. And we've been recognized nationally because we actually we average a 17% profit. So even after, like you said, after we've added scope, after there's been increased cost because of it, we still are right within a percent or two of that each year. And I know my assistant director negotiates each of those, and he does an excellent job of coordinating with the consultant, but also our cabinet project manager across the state to make sure that we're all on the same page. And we don't want to be in the business of overspending. For example, on this contract, number 12 with Stantec, the original contract was for phase 1 engineering for $1.1 million. The actual first modification, we actually took back $419,000 because we removed scope. So that happens quite a bit also. Again, just because we contract for something doesn't mean that consultant's getting that work. We always want to be flexible, and if the consultant is no longer being asked to do those services, they know, and we expect that they will be doing a negative contract modification to get those funds back.
Okay, I understand about the built-in. I'm not crazy about the idea of having built-in. 15 to 17%. In my opinion, if that end up being the total net profit of a firm, that's pretty significant when you consider the salaries, for example, of the owners and all the costs involved, all the gross costs and all the net costs. That's pretty significant. So that we automatically build in some of these things, percentages. I'm not sure that's the most cost-effective way of doing business for the taxpayers.
Any other questions, comments? If not, entertain a motion.
Motion.
Motion by Representative Pollack, seconded by Co-Chair Hart. All those in favor will vote aye. All opposed vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell. No. Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Thomas. Representative Chester Burton.
Yes.
Representative McCool. Representative Pollack.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for being available to us this morning. Very valuable information and always a great education for us. Thank you. Next item on the pool list are with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife Resources, and our number is 21 on the routine PSC green list. We'll also review number 70 on the PSC Amendment Ivory list and number 13 on the MOA 15 under list. And I see representatives are here. Good to see you this morning.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. If you would, please raise your right hand after you identify yourself for the record. Please identify yourself for the record first.
Melissa Trent with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. I am the Director of Administrative Services.
Jenny Gilbert. I'm the Legislative Liaison in the Commissioner's Office.
Again, thank you for being here. If you would, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Senator Boswell has questions.
Can we start with number 7?
Yes. 70 on the PSC green list. Excuse me, 21 on the routine PSC green list. We'll work from that one first.
Okay.
We're working on the green list.
Yes.
I got it. We'll mix these together, which is what I asked. Okay, number 20, no? 21, there we go. Okay, we're starting with number 21. Okay, well. Yeah, thank you for being here today. The Department of Fish and Wildlife is something I'm particularly interested in because I'm a lifelong fisher and hunter, and I'm very involved in these. And so can you just explain to us, $28,558, I know it's federal funds, but we've got a national move now with the new president to try to get spending under control to the federal level. Can you explain to me what good this does for the people of Kentucky, this study?
So this project is a project with let me make sure, this is Eastern Kentucky University with our yellow-spotted woodland salamander. So the Eastern Kentucky salamander, it looks like, is potentially being listed on the endangered species. So this is in our state wildlife plan. We not only address conservation for game species, but non-game. So this would be one of our non-game, and we do have state wildlife funding that is through U.S. Fish and Wildlife. This is Section 6 funding for non-game species. So this is one of those projects that we are, Eastern Kentucky is actually, they're going to do some tagging of these. Let me see what else they're doing on this.
I would like to note that those species that are listed in the State Wildlife Action Plan actually go through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. And then that document, that plan is approved at the federal level.
Yes.
So this is in connection with that office.
Okay. There's no indication, though, that this particular species is you say that there's indications, but in Kentucky, are there is this a real issue with this particular
Yes.
creature?
Yes.
Which is not, we are the Department of Fish and Wildlife. All our fees and things that are funded, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, come from the people of Kentucky as far as hunting license, fishing
Right.
license, and all that.
Yes, sir.
And was this a fish or a wildlife?
This is a wildlife because it's a salamander.
So it would be considered one of our non-game
Yes.
species in our non-game program.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I continue to be concerned about when I see federal funds to do something like this. There was another one on here I think that we can talk about that's going to be very similar to this, where there's indications that need to be studied, and I did some study myself, and then, well, let's talk about that later. You want to vote on this individually? Huh?
Yeah. Are there any questions regarding number 21 on the PSC green list? There being none, there's a motion to approve number 21 on the PSC green list.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Co-Chair Hart, seconded by Representative Chester Burton. All those in favor vote aye. All opposed will vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell.
I'd like to vote no, explain my vote.
Yes.
I think we're going to get a control on federal spending for things like this, so I'm going to vote no.
Senator Douglas.
I'm going to vote aye, but I want to explain my vote. I also think there'll be some changes at the federal level. I think we have to start taking a closer look at where expenditures are going and whom those expenditures are helping. But that's a federal issue. So I vote aye.
Senator Thomas. Representative Chester Burton.
Yes.
Representative McCool. Representative Pollock.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
I vote aye because I have a soft spot in my heart for the yellow-spotted woodland salamander. So motion carries on that particular one. I want to continue with number 70 on the PSC Amendment Ivory List. Center.
Yeah. Yes, this is also, well, it says federal, then agency and capital construction. So I'm not sure how that's split. This is another one of those things that I continue to be concerned about. I have been involved in many of these so-called archaeological studies, and especially in regard to the Corps of Engineers having to do with artifacts and things of that nature. I guess I don't quite understand why we're doing so many of these archaeological surveys, and maybe you can shed a little more light on that as to why we should be spending this kind of money.
Okay, so this one in particular, this is a modification, just like Mr. Pelfrey had referenced earlier. This originally was an archaeological survey for 2 projects, and then what we do is we did a modification to add an additional $10,000 for a project. And the reason why it says multiple funding is because this actually covers 3 archaeological surveys. We put out a bid typically for these, and at the time, if we know all of the projects that we will have surveys, we will include those on there. So there's a wildlife one. There is actually an engineering, or 2 engineering ones on this one. So the additional $10,000 was required by, let me see here. We had, this is on our Camp Wallace Dining Hall, and the State Historical Preservation Office, SHPO, required us to do a survey on this project on the original old dining hall before we did the new one.
Well, you got me on that word required.
So
I realize this is just an increase of something we're already
Right.
doing. I
Yes.
understand that. So that part of it's not so much a concern as I look at this whole thing and see how much money we're spending on these archaeologicals, and I think it's a waste of money myself. Okay.
Any other questions, comments? If not, I would entertain a motion. Motion by Co-Chair Hart. Is there a second by Representative Pollock? All those in favor of the motion vote aye. All opposed will vote no. Kim, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell,
No.
Senator Douglas,
I vote aye, but Mr. Chairman, I have to say that I'm learning a great deal about phase contracts, and I really appreciate what you guys are teaching me because I'm sure I will use that.
Sure you will.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is phase two.
Senator Thomas, Representative Chester Burton.
Yes.
Representative McCool, Representative Pollock.
Yes.
Representative Hart,
Yes.
Chairman Meredith.
Aye. Motion carries. Last contract we have for you folks is number 13 on the MOA less than 50,000 list. Senator, again, this is yours. Number 13 on the MOA for 50,000 and less.
Which color is that?
Gray.
Gray. Yeah, gray.
So that is number 12, number 13. Correct?
Yes, 13.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, this is for the, let's see here, provide funds to document the migratory ecology of the eastern Kentucky whippoorwill. This is
Yes.
the one that I did a little research on, and I found that only one state, I believe it's Vermont, has any indication whatsoever that there's any limiting number of these animals, these birds. So I guess I have a broader concern here about how we're spending money, Department of Fish and Wildlife. Explain why. In the state of Kentucky, our quail population is all but, they're gone. They're practically extinct in the state of Kentucky. Our dove population, based on your own numbers, the numbers of doves that are currently residing or migrating to and from our state is greatly reduced. And so as our waterfowl population. And I really don't understand, since the majority of funds that come into the Department of Fish and Wildlife are from things like hunting and fishing, why aren't we more concerned about these animals that have been a part of our Kentucky heritage for all these years versus spending money? Now, I know, again, this is, well, it says agencies, but can you explain to me why we're concentrating on this particular whippoorwill? And then why are we not doing more to deal with, we know, issues with quail population, with dove population, with waterfowl populations?
Well, I'm not the biologist, but I can tell you that our game species biologists that would deal with the dove and the quail and the turkey and the waterfowl are monitoring those populations. They are providing information to our commission on a quarterly basis. We are currently in the middle of a study that our turkey biologist and part of our wildlife program is doing specific to just the number of turkeys across the state, and we're seeing positive numbers and feedback from that. I will say, in terms of non-game species, where this might seem odd to some, because when people think of fish and wildlife, they typically think more of our game side. Any conservation efforts or habitat improvement and management of our resources that benefit the non-game species in turn benefit the game species. And we've seen that repeatedly over time in different studies and wildlife management plans that we have used across the state. So I think that just in defense of our non-game biologists, they would argue that both of these studies, while they are specific to non-game, as you indicated, give us great information on the environment and the habitat and how that affects not just the non-game, but the game as well.
And some of the funding for these species is set aside specifically for these non-game species. So in this instance, we also work with a lot of other states within our region through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of our Atlanta office. And since this is a species of greatest conservation need, we are tracking this specific project they will be putting tags on these birds and tracking their migration and working with Mississippi Flyway and other partners to see where they are breeding and to make sure that that's a healthy population. So that's what our biologists use these grant. And these grant fundings are usually set aside just for these species that are non-game versus the game.
Okay, well, since this is my last meeting with contract review, I would just like to say that follow up. So, just one small comment regarding what you said. We don't have a problem with turkey population in the state of Kentucky. I'm out there. I know what's out there, but we do have a serious problem with the quail population. For 30 years ago, I was a member of Quail Unlimited. We would have a banquet. We'd have 500